So, I want to talk about something. I want to talk about, like people are always, I call it shit testing you, strangers. Everyone feels entitled. Everyone assumes they're in the right place to kind of shit test you, give you a crusty, tell you to F off, treat you less than royal, treat you less than awesome. And you're like, can't you see how fabulous I am? Can't you see my radiance and my the blessing that I am in your life? And oh, no, you don't have time and you need to point your finger, you need to be pushy, you need to ask for your money back and you need to try to get what you want and you need and and you're not feeling seen, you're not feeling heard, and they're projecting, they're hurting your feelings, they're sending bad energy and all that stuff. Okay, yeah, that goes on. uh and it's like, what is the formula that makes this happen? I like to call it the dark triad, to kind of make fun of the dark triad theory. Certain facial features, you know that it's like, I think it's like certain facial features, and then you have to be like sociopathic or narcissistic with Machiavelli traits is like the dark triad. So for everyday people, in maybe in customer service or a little upset in the family, three things have to happen. One, there has to be already a buildup of negative energy. So you could call that the shadow self. Shadow energy, that primal self that's in all of us, that's kind of a beast, that enjoys inflicting pain, that wants to cause suffering. You know, it's there to protect you. It's there, like when you're in a fight, it just has this instinct to destroy, clobber, beat up, kill. So we use it in hunting. That's a practical use of these shadow forces. We use it in protecting others. So we stand up and advocate to defend something of value. This is a positive use of the shadow forces or the dark force. We all have it. So that is one ingredient that has to be there. The other ingredient is you have to have an ego. What is an ego? It's an identity, it's your character, it's your construct of yourself. And what people also fail to realize is your ego is also dependent upon the idea construct of how you see the world. How you see yourself is also how you see the world. How you interact with the world is also how you interact with yourself. But there is no ego, right? Right, because it's an idea. So you're an idea. You exist because you're the one who created the idea, okay? But the idea itself is not superior to the creator of the idea, okay? So you can not panic and not worry if your ego gets hurt. It's just an idea. It's a grand idea, usually with lots of history and stories, so it holds on to grudges and things like that, which goes into the third leg of this dark triad. Why people do these things to us and why do we do this to each other? How can we understand when someone is doing something that seems to be very painful and negative? So the third leg is what I call I'm right. So we all have a rule book, you know. Some people call it the Holy Bible. Other people call it the Witch's Grimoire. You have your own rule book on how life is supposed to work and how people are supposed to treat you, and your own moral code. If people treat me like this, then I feel good and I'm going to respond in a rewarding, positive way. They get rewarded. If people do this, then I'm going to be mean. I'm going to strike back. I'm going to feel offended and whatever. Either way, I'm right. So I call it bipolar, but really it's like a duality system. And so we have a judge, jury, and executioner. And in the blink of an eye, a situation happens, whether you interpret it correctly or not, you're going to open your book of the law, your rule book on life and how others are supposed to treat you and how you're supposed to treat others, you're going to find that page, you're going to find that paragraph, you're going to find that article sentence, and then you're going to determine the outcome slash judge if they, go to jail and are now going to be criminalized for that behavior, that attitude, that energy, that situation. And then you might even play the cop, you might play the jailer, and you might feel vengeful, and you might punish. Okay? But this is something that's going, okay, so this goes on, but guess what? We all don't have the same rule book. We are all rulers of our own kingdom, but in a public space, you're not the ruler. So there's a lot of people assuming they rule a certain territory around, their vehicle, a certain area around the freeway. So we're like road rage. Get out of my way. This is my territory. Get out of my space. Or else, Or they might assume the place where they work. They're entitled to certain behaviors and certain levels of space and authority. It's an assumption, it's not true, but they give it to themselves. They just kind of take that power. And anyone who questions it is now subject to punishment, because in their rule book, anyone that's questioning them must be going against them. Therefore, they're wrong, they're the enemy, and they must be destroyed. So you have these three elements. When they come together, you get a horrendous act of violence. You can even get a passive, aggressive act of energy blast, violence. In some form, you're going to get a reaction. They're going to feel triggered. Okay. So we now understand that psychological thing of the dark triad. It is shadow energy material. So if you hold the cool thing about holding grudges is that energy just kind of rots in you and gets super toxic. And then people just sling it around. They go, I'm going to weaponize my injury. I'm going to weaponize my grudge, my resentment, my anger against the system. And I'll actually start using it on innocent bystanders. So all the rage I actually have towards my parents, I'm going to take out on this cashier. All the rage I have at the government and my limited, in this society where I can't move around correctly, I'm going to take that out on my little brother. And so we wonder where these massive amounts of energy come from to destroy someone, maybe in a business meeting or whatever. And we're redirecting it of other issues. So we weaponized our trauma. We weaponized our emotions. We basically made an ice ball to throw when we needed it. So this is one reason why also people don't heal. If I heal, I won't have that negative energy anymore. Now I can't bulldoze my way through life. And then I might have to rewrite my book of the law, my book of judgment, my construct. And that means I would change, my behavior would change. That's new. That's different. Oh, good. We're in the dark triad. All three elements support the idea of me and my construct. So I won't go there. So my shadow helps support my ego. My ego helps support my shadow. They tag team together. We use the book to justify our actions, and we attack someone. And what's even better is we feel good after it. As long as we feel like we're in the right, we can sleep guilt-free. We get reward. We feel like a hero. We feel like an advocate. We stood up for our rights. We stood up for everyone of our gender orientation and our nationality, our stigmatized whatever. So we can even add that in there. We can borrow from the collective and put into our justification story to feel even better about ourselves. No one was watching, but I did this for everyone. So it's this type of thinking that's going on inside of people when they act out on someone else. strangers, even better, a stranger. I won't remember their face. I don't know them. I've objectified them. There's the innocent bystander. It's just roadkill. It's just an animal. Boom. You know, it's just a weed. We'll just pull it. So we justify it all day long using our book. We turn a blind eye to what we're actually doing. We discount and we do not acknowledge our shadow, which grows in power. We hold those grudges. We don't work stuff out, so it rots and gets infected. And then we use that infection that's now like a virus, and we spread it into our work environments, toxic relationships. We put it on our partner. And then we justify it all with our rule book. And especially if we twist the rule book a little bit, add in a few religious figures, add in a few cultural, popular moral beliefs that are current for the time, and we can really justify a lot of horrible crap that we do to ourselves and others do to us and we do to each other. So now I find that very interesting. So, and then we're going to kind of change subjects a little bit, but still within this territory. So let's acknowledge, no matter what we've experienced through life at different ages of our life, we had limited resources to understand what was going on, okay? We're actually not dumb, we're not naive. Our intuition, our higher consciousness is informing us of everything, actually. But when it comes to this experience and the age that you're at and your ability to grasp that information, you might be running on what's called low bandwidth. You're not able to take in the full spectrum of information. You maybe can only take in 8 bits of information at a time. Maybe you can graduate to go to 16 bits, and hopefully even 24 bits of information at a time. So that's kind of an analogy for low bandwidth. Actually, we're just going to keep going. The noise is the dryer or the washing machine in the other room that's not bolted down. Anyways, so we have gaps in our understanding of ourselves. We have gaps in the understanding of how the world works. And so that translates as gaps in our boundaries, our gaps in our sense of where do I begin and where do you begin? Where do I end and you begin? So we have these very not clearly defined boundaries and not clear definition on how we're understanding our experiences. Well, guess what? Our good old brain helps us out and just fills in those gaps with information that may or may not be true. It fills in gaps. Oh, so you heard a story. It was very similar to the situation you're in. Okay, the brain is pretty smart. It will just take that information and shove it in those gaps to make it a streamline of information that makes logical sense. He was out. He didn't call me. He said he was with his friends. I didn't get a text for 3 hours. His pattern is going on. It's a weird hour. He must be cheating on me. That's a logical conclusion, right? So that's a good example of you were left with the unknown. The story had gaps in it. The experience was kind of new and different. It's a gap. And so then you filled it in with something maybe you saw on social media or a pattern that you saw play out in your family dynamics, And so you got all scared, you had anxiety because you were unconsciously filling in the gaps with false information. We do it all the time. Limited information, misleading information. If it's not the exact correct information, it's false. No matter how good it sounds, no matter how logical. So logic is a system. It's not actually the truth. Reason and logic are kind of like what sounds true, what's very possible, but it's not the actual truth. It's just a good bet. It's a good formula. You know, it's a good model, a thinking structure, an outline. You know, it's a structure, but it's not the truth. So we come up with wrong conclusions. And then our shadow self is kind of nice and fills in those gaps with garbage like self limiting beliefs, he must not like me, I must not be good enough, I must be ugly. So it might throw in some comparison. So even information that is completely non related can get put in there. Maybe I'm fat, you know, and then you remember being a cheerleader and someone was saying you're too fat to be on the cheerleading squad, whatever. You might put in some of your old baggage, your history to fill in these gaps because our mind doesn't want any of those gaps. It wants a steady stream of truth. It wants a steady stream of predictable logic to feel safe. But unfortunately, so much of our lives, we are not intelligent creatures. We're weaving stories all the time. We're creating narratives that sound true. And some of these narratives perpetuate negative emotions. And those negative emotions perpetuate feeling triggered and responding in inappropriate ways. So you're like living in your history. You're living in your injury, your unhealed wounds that everyone's so into. And let's just acknowledge you have gaps in your logic. So literally every time your eye blinks, what is that, like 8 times per like minute or something like that, there's a gap. You're missing information. Your eyes are closed. So our eyes move pretty fast, so you're not missing much information. Do you really hear everything? Do you really see it? We have 2 eyes in front of our face, not in the back. We do not have a panoramic view. We fill it in with assuming. Our brain does it. It goes, oh, I assume the door is over here, so I don't really have to fully focus and acknowledge the door. I'll just assume the door is there. Yep, there's the handle, open the door and go in. Forget about it. So we literally even erase memory or information. So there's tons of gaps, and we have a computer programming running, filling in the gaps with what would probably fit. And so now that you really know this, you can stop. So that's really kind of what it means when assumption and why it's dangerous, why it's not good. It's not because it's a judgment call. It's because it's going to lead you to unfortunate situations, unfortunate reactions where there's misunderstanding. So these gaps, these blind spots, these voids is what I'm telling you about. It can be a recipe for disaster. So these are just my thoughts. I'm just sharing them with you. This video says it's going to end, and it may have already ended. Because my phone is old and it's giving me trouble. But I hope you can be more gentle with yourself and other people and not take things so personally.